They were the ghosts of the Atlantic, feared more than battleships. In just 1 year, they nearly brought an entire empire to its knees, sending millions of tons of cargo to the bottom. But why did they suffer the highest casualty rate of any service in World War II? And what single Allied technology, which they never managed to overcome, turned these hunters into the hunted? It all didn't start in 1939, but much earlier. The history of the Third Reich's submarine fleet is not just a chronicle of shipbuilding, but a saga of overcoming national humiliation and a demonstration of technological tenacity that predetermined the course of the Battle of the Atlantic. The Treaty of Versailles in 1919, designed to disarm Germany forever, categorically forbade it not only from building, but even from designing submarines. It seemed the era of the German U-boats, which during the unrestricted submarine warfare of 1917-1918 had sunk millions of tons of Allied shipping and nearly brought Great Britain to its knees, was irrevocably over. The image of the invisible convoy killer was supposed to remain merely a nightmare in the memory of British admirals. But the spirit of submarine warfare survived in offices and at secret shipyards. As early as the beginning of the 1920s, under the cover of private companies, Germany began the methodical recreation of its submarine potential. The key figure of this underground renaissance was Captain Karl Dönitz, a young, ambitious officer, a theorist who believed that the future war at sea would be decided not in grand battleship duels, but in the methodical strangulation of enemy communications by packs of small but deadly submarines. His doctrine was born in silence, in opposition to the official oceanic strategy that relied on giant surface raiders. Through foreign front companies, primarily the Dutch Ingenieurskantoor voor Scheepsbouw, EVS, Germany carried out design work and even built prototypes for Turkey, Finland, and Spain. This network allowed for testing technologies, training engineers, and, most importantly, training future crews in near-combat conditions. By the mid-1930s, with the Nazis coming to power and the official renunciation of the Versailles restrictions, this underground work yielded rapid results. All of IVS's developments were immediately used to deploy mass production. The first serial coastal boats, Type II, nicknamed dugouts for their modest size, were launched. They were followed by what would later become the legendary workhorses of the Kriegsmarine, the medium Type 7 and the large ocean-going Type 9. By September 1939, contrary to the widespread myth of their small numbers, Germany already had 57 combat-ready submarines. But the numbers weren't the main thing. The main thing was that Dönitz and his team had a ready, meticulously detailed doctrine. While the British fleet was preparing for Jutland 2.0, Germany was preparing for total war on communications. The foundation for the largest and most merciless battle for supply lines in human history had been laid. The packs of gray steel predators in the Atlantic were only waiting for the order. The first years of World War II became a period of unchallenged dominance for the U-Boot-Waffe in the Atlantic. It was an era when a single submarine could make the entire British Empire shudder. The submarines operated with almost piratical daring and frightening efficiency, terrorizing Allied fleets and turning the ocean expanses into a field for a deadly hunt. The apotheosis of this golden age was the legendary raid of U-47 under the command of the young and ambitious Günther Prien in October 1939. Penetrating through the narrow, treacherously winding, and supposedly impassable Kirk Sound into the British main naval base at Scapa Flow, Priam found himself in the heart of the enemy fleet. His target, the old but symbolically immensely important battleship MS Royal Oak. 3 torpedo salvos, and the giant began to sink, taking 833 sailors with it. This attack was not just a tactical success, it was a powerful propaganda triumph. Goebbels turned Priam into a national hero, and the attack itself proved the ubiquity and invulnerability of German submarines, dealing a crushing blow to the prestige and sense of security of the Royal Navy. However, Dönitz's real secret weapon was not the courage of individuals, but the systemic wolf pack, tactic, refined like a Swiss watch. Its genius and deadly mechanics were based on strict discipline, centralized control, and the use of radio. A scout boat, upon discovering a convoy, would not attack, but would take a shadowing position, continuously transmitting the target's coordinates, course, and speed to the submarine force headquarters in Lorient. There, operators on a huge map of the Atlantic would calculate a rendezvous point and pull the entire pack, sometimes up to 15-20 U-boats, towards it. The attack almost always occurred at night and on the surface, where the low silhouettes of the boats were practically invisible to enemy lookouts, and their diesel engines allowed them to reach speeds sufficient to overtake even fast convoys. On signal, the wolves synchronously wedged into the convoy formation, passing right between the neat columns of transports. Chaos ensued. Torpedoes struck targets at point-blank range. Commanders like Otto Kretschmer, who followed the motto "one torpedo, one ship," demonstrated phenomenal efficiency, sending over 40 ships to the bottom. Parallel to the ocean raids of the Type 9 giants, a little-known quiet war was waged in shallow waters. The miniature dugouts, Type 2, with their limited range and cramped compartments, operated in coastal waters, laid mines right off the coast of England, and attacked coastal shipping. These operations were fraught with colossal risk. The boats could blow up on their own mines, become easy prey for patrol boats, or simply vanish without a trace into the depths, leaving behind only a laconic entry in the log: failed to return from patrol. The circumstances of the loss of entire crews remained unexplained, adding an aura of grim mystery to the image of the U-boat. Initial technical superiority was a key trump card for the U-boats, and their arsenal constantly evolved in an arms race conducted in deep secrecy. This invisible battle in laboratories and testing grounds was often more important than the clashes in the ocean. One of the main secrets of the early period was the torpedoes. Initially, the boats were armed with steam gas G7A torpedoes, powerful, but leaving a noticeable trail of bubbles on the surface, a telltale sign visible for a kilometer during the day. Their replacement was the wakeless electric G7E. For an attacking commander, this was a gift. He could disappear immediately after firing. However, this weapon had a fatal, almost catastrophic flaw. The complex magnetic pistols, which were supposed to detonate under a ship's keel, and the power system itself were extremely unreliable. Submariners recalled with horror dramatic stories when, after hours of maneuvering and a perfect attack run right under the flank of a convoy, the salvos simply fell silent, torpedoes with improperly set gyroscopes veered off course, passed beneath the target's keels due to incorrect depth settings, or simply failed to explode on direct impact. In one such incident, U-99 under Otto Kretschmer fired 7 torpedoes at a stationary transport. Not a single one detonated. The boat was left defenseless under the nose of the enemy. In an attempt to turn the tide and respond to the strengthening of escorts, German engineers created a veritable wonder weapon, the acoustic homing torpedo, T5, Zaunkönig, Wren. The idea was truly revolutionary for 1943, a torpedo that heard the noise of an escort ship's propellers and automatically steered towards it. This was supposed to force destroyers and corvettes to abandon active, aggressive pursuit, forcing them onto the defensive. But here, too, there were fatal miscalculations. The torpedo, programmed for a specific frequency range, could not always distinguish friend from foe. There are known cases where a Zaunkönig fired at a destroyer, picking up the louder noise from the propellers of the attacking boat itself as it tried to dive, would turn around and head for it, forcing the crew to perform desperate, panicked, evasive maneuvers. Another technological response to the growing threat from the air was the snorkel, a device borrowed from the Dutch even before the war. It allowed a boat to run on diesel engines at periscope depth without surfacing to recharge batteries, radically reducing its radar visibility. This provided the U-boats with much-needed cover. However, a paradox characteristic of technological races arose. Ironically, the tiny, iced-up silhouette of the snorkel itself became an excellent target for the new centimetric wavelength radars, ASV MiG-3, which began to be installed en masse on Allied aircraft. These radars were immune to most weather interference and easily picked up even such a small target. Thus, the technology designed to hide began itself to glow on the scopes, heralding the beginning of the end of submarine superiority and driving the U-boats into a trap with no way out. By 1942-1943, the Allies, having recovered from the initial shock, deployed an unprecedented arsenal of technologies and tactics against the U-boats, step by step, depriving the submarines of their main advantage, invisibility. The war in the Atlantic turned from a hunt by submarines for transports into a hunt by escort groups and aircraft for the submarines themselves. The hunters learned to be more cunning, more technological, and faster than their prey. The development of the convoy system, active sonar ASDIC, the predecessor of modern sonar, and most importantly, radar, brought about a revolution. While early model, metric wavelength radar was inaccurate and weather-dependent, the appearance of centimetric radar was a shock to the U-boats. Now an aircraft or ship could detect a surfaced boat at night, in fog, in a storm, from a distance of several miles. The night surface, once a safe refuge, became a death trap. But the real game-changer was the closing of the Black Gap, the vast zone in the middle of the ocean unreachable by Allied shore-based aircraft, where the wolf packs felt safe. This problem was solved by the mass appearance of escort carriers, small floating airfields accompanying convoys, and long-range maritime patrol aircraft like the B-24 Liberator, whose range covered the entire Atlantic. With their appearance in 1943, not a single square mile of the ocean remained safe for U-boats. A boat spotted by an aircraft had mere minutes to dive before it was covered with depth charges or the latest anti-submarine rockets. However, the most closely guarded secret of the Allies, the true secret of all secrets, was Operation Ultra, the work of deciphering German codes at Bletchley Park. The German Enigma cipher machine was considered unbreakable, but British cryptographers, using the world's first prototype computers, bomb Turing, cracked its code. Every radio message sent by Dönitz to coordinate the wolf packs, every weather report, every position report was intercepted, decrypted, and delivered to Allied naval command centers almost in real time. Convoys could be routed around waiting packs, and hunter-killer groups could lie in wait for the boats at their rendezvous points. The German submariners themselves, devoutly believing in the security of their communications, remained unaware, baffled as to why the Allies seemed to read their minds and always be in the right place at the right time. The new German threats were also met with answers. The appearance of the acoustic T-5 torpedoes provoked the creation of simple but brilliant countermeasures. Escort ships began using towed noisemakers like the Foxer, a construction of metal rods connected by cables that, when towed, created an acoustic noise much louder than the ship's propellers. Confused, the smart torpedoes almost always went for this false target, heading into emptiness, while the ships evaded the attack with practiced zigzag maneuvers. Thus, the technological and tactical superiority that Dönitz was so proud of finally and irrevocably passed to the Allies. The turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic did not come gradually, but swiftly and irreversibly, like a dam breaking. The spring of 1943 was the time when luck finally turned away from Dönitz's Grey Wolves. May of that year went down in the history of the Kriegsmarine as Black May, a month of crushing, irreplaceable losses that became the point of no return. In those 31 days, 43 U-boats were sent to the bottom of the Atlantic. For the first time in the history of the submarine war, fleet losses steadily and inexorably exceeded the German industry's ability to replace them. The statistics became an inexorable verdict. At the end of the month, Admiral Dönitz, a former submariner himself, was forced to admit the bitter truth he had so long refused to see. In his order, he stated, "We are experiencing the heaviest crisis in the submarine battle, as losses have reached unbearable proportions." He was forced to withdraw his packs from the North Atlantic, the main battlefield. This was not a temporary tactical measure, but a strategic defeat. The Atlantic, which just 6 months earlier had been a German hunting ground, was effectively lost. Behind the dry official statistics of sinking ships lay a monstrous human tragedy. The percentage of killed among Kriegsmarine submariners was the highest of any service in World War II, by various estimates, from 70% to 75%. This meant that upon joining the submarine arm, a sailor had a very high probability of never returning. The death or capture of the most experienced, battle-hardened wolves, like Kretschmer, captured in March 1941, and Prien, killed in March 1941, meant the loss not just of ships, but of priceless, non-transferable combat experience. Their places were taken by young, poorly trained crews sent on their first and often last patrol. Among the remaining veterans, psychological tension, fatalism, and a sense of doom grew. Each new mission was increasingly perceived not as an opportunity for heroism, but as a one-way trip. Germany's last desperate gamble, an attempt to replay an already lost game, was the Type 21 electroboats, nicknamed Elektroboote. This was not an evolution, but a real revolution in submarine design, decades ahead of its time. They had a streamlined, teardrop-shaped hull optimized for underwater travel, allowing them to reach an unprecedented underwater speed of 17.5 knots, faster than many escort ships, huge battery capacity for prolonged, up to several days, submerged travel, and automated systems for rapid torpedo reloading. Essentially, these were the first true submarines in the modern sense, designed for warfare underwater, not on the surface. However, this technological breakthrough came catastrophically late. The type Petit Wang was too complex for mass assembly in an industry crumbling under round-the-clock Allied bombing. They suffered from numerous teething troubles, poor build quality, and defective welds. Of the 118 boats built, only a handful were truly combat-ready, and they entered service far too late to have any impact on the course of the war. They remained a symbol of a brilliant but fruitless attempt to win the war with technology, when the strategic initiative had already been irrevocably lost. The final chapter of the U-Boot-Waffe's history was as dramatic, grim, and contradictory as its entire combat path. In the last weeks of the Third Reich's agony, when the war had come to German soil and the ports were bombed daily, the command faced the prospect that its advanced technological secrets, hard-won over years of war, would fall into enemy hands. In response to this threat, on April 30, 1945, the order Regenbogen, Rainbow, was given for the mass scuttling of the entire submarine fleet in port. It was an act of desperation and fanaticism. Dozens of U-boats around the world, from Norway to Germany, were deliberately sent to the bottom by their own crews. With demolition charges and opened seacocks, the steel predators that had tormented the Atlantic for years sank into the muddy depths of their own harbors. The subsequent confusion with the order's cancellation, there is a version that Dönitz, having become head of state after Hitler's suicide, tried to cancel it, did not reach all commanders in time, and many boats shared the fate of the thousands of their victims lying on the ocean floor. Vivid, almost symbolic episodes of this universal chaos included both tragicomic accidents and acts of common sense and humanity. The infamous U-1206, one of the new Type 7 boats, sank not in battle, but due to a catastrophic malfunction of its complex naval toilet system, leading to flooding and battery failure. On the other hand, many commanders, contrary to fanaticism and orders, consciously chose the lives of their exhausted crews. They raised white flags or transmitted radio messages of surrender, taking their boats to neutral waters or to meet Allied ships, preferring the disgrace of captivity to a meaningless, heroic death. But the story of the U-boats did not end there. Their main, most lasting legacy went not to Germany, but to its victors. Operation Deadliest, the destruction of the surrendered boats, was only part of the picture. The real prize was the captured German boats, especially the revolutionary Type 20Y and the smaller Type 43. They were immediately divided between the USA, USSR, Great Britain, and France, and meticulously studied as if aliens had left behind their starship. These boats became the textbook of the future, having a direct and immediate influence on the post-war submarine construction of all major naval powers. The American Guppy, Greater Underwater Propulsive Power Program for modernizing pre-war submarines, was a direct development of the Type 21 ideas. The first Soviet mass-produced post-war submarines of Project 613, Whiskey by NATO classification, and Project 611, Zulu, were nothing more than deep adaptations and developments of the German Elektroboute. French and British projects of that period also bore the clear imprint of German technology. And what do you think? If Germany had managed to deploy the Type 21's electroboats a year earlier, could it have changed the outcome of the war? Or was the collapse of the Reich already inevitable? Write your opinion in the comments. It will be interesting to read. If you enjoyed this analysis, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. See you in new videos.